everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. So, we're here again to discuss the Delphi case and the mess, the absolute mess that is Judge Francis Seagull. Completely unsurprisingly, she has ordered, some of you will know this if you've seen the news, she's ordered that the confessions that Richard Allen made whilst in the throes of psychosis are completely fine, totally fine to take to trial. So the 61 confessions that Richard Allen made between beginning of April and July of 2023, when he was in the throes of psychosis, that's all fair game for trial. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. All fair game. So we're going to talk about her order. It's only very short, so it shouldn't take too long to get through. But there's one more to come. Will it come today? Maybe. One more order to come. That is her judgment on whether or not Nick McClelland gets his wish. The prosecutor, Slicky Nicky, gets his wish. That words like Odinism, phrases like ritualistic killing, and names like Brad Holder, Patrick Westfall, Elvis Fields, even Ron Logan, they're going to be banned from the trial. That's what Nick wants, which basically puts an end to the possibility of Richard Allen's defence team putting together a third-party guilt defence. It knocks that completely off its pedestal, and it gives the defence a very tough time. So that order is still to come. But for today, let's talk about this order. Jane on the Journey, thank you for the £2. She's so corrupt, she absolutely is. And we've got 10 gifted memberships from the truly wonderful Purple AJ. Another 10. 10 yesterday, 10 today. Incredible. Words fail me. All right, so we've got Rebecca Ann, Heidi, Trish, who else have we got? Eleanor, Cleveland Rocks, Jumbo Shrimp, what a great name. Doxy Mom, Susie, and Yorkie Doobie Doo. Oh, and we've got another one down here, Ginger Fern. So welcome you 10. You get a month's free membership courtesy of the superstar that is Purple AJ. And yeah, check out the members area. We have members lives in there. I keep promising you another members live, and it's coming. I swear it's coming. I've got like 3 ideas. I've got 3 members lives that I want to do, but hey, I keep promising. But we've got members lives, we've got short videos, we've got bloopers, and we've got a bunch of status updates and cute puppy pics. So go and check out the members area. All right. So who's in the house? I'll say a few hellos while I'm here, because this is not going to take too long to get through. We've got JC, we've got Coventina, we've got Wayward. Absolutely it is. But this went beyond depression. This went into full-blown psychosis. So, yeah, clearly Francis knows better, though. Francis knows better than, psych experts worldwide. She thinks that people who are on the throes of psychosis are able to make voluntary statements. That's what she thinks. There is seriously something wrong with her. There absolutely is. Good morning, Princess. Are we surprised? No, we're not surprised. We're absolutely not surprised. I saw this coming. I think we all saw this coming a mile off. The Fat Lady channel. Good morning. Good afternoon. Down under with love. It is absolutely ridiculous. Totally. Hello, Nicola, Angie, baby, Jackie. For once, you got a notification. Oh, wow. YouTube actually doing its job. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought? Maybe Judge Gold is suffering from psychosis. She's suffering from something, Mike. I wouldn't want to put a label on it, though. Hello, Eleanor. And we've got, who else? Trish, hello. Purple AJ. Yep, it absolutely is Indiana justice at its finest. Yeah, can't beat Indiana for a good dose of justice. Hello, Karen R. And we've got Corona Knitting Denmark. From Denmark. We got a good bunch of people in the house today. We've got Vicky from Texas. We've got CW from my neck of the woods, driving back from dropping the daughter off. Hopefully be back in 10 minutes. Maybe you're right here, right now. Hello, Leah, Mimi, Tanya. This Mint. Good morning from Central Scotland. Hello, Kate. From Central Scotland. It's actually warm and bright in North Wales for Trish. Yeah, it was bright here this morning when I went out. It's still a little bit bright, but it's there's a bit of cloud cover coming over now. So anyway, Vicky, can't wait to hear my displeasure. All right, well, without further ado, let's hear my displeasure, shall we? All right, let's make this bigger here. Okay, so this is the order. All right. I don't know who's discussed this, like on YouTube. I don't know how many people have discussed this because I got into the Coburger hearing. It went on all day, like all afternoon and all evening my time. So all day, Idaho time. Yeah, Brian Coburger's hearing as to whether they're going to move the proceedings to Ada County, which is like 300 miles away. So I can understand if you watch the Coburger hearing. I'm not going to talk about it too much because, of course, we're all here for Delphi. But there was some interesting discussions. Maybe I should do a live stream on it, but I'm not really that bothered. There were some interesting witnesses that the defense put on, and you know, they make some very good points for moving the trial, and it's somewhat standard practice with high-profile trials to move them out of the immediate vicinity. So, look, I'm kind of in favour of them moving the trial out of Latah County. However, in closing, I thought that the state made some really good points about the practicalities of it. Like a 3-month trial being held 300 miles away, and there's going to be bias wherever they go. Juries are biased world over. You know, jury trials, they're the best we've got, justice-wise, but they're not perfect, are they? And there's always going to be the potential for jury bias, whether it's a high-profile case or not. So I understood what the state was saying about the practicalities of it, moving all the evidence and everything 300 miles away for 3 months. It's a tall order. So Judge John Judge, who I really like, if you follow the Coburger case and you watch all the pre-trial hearings, I really like John Judge. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's a little bit too meek and mild, if anything. But he's a world away from Frances Gull. He's a world away from her. And yeah, I like him. So he said that this is the most difficult decision of his professional career. But can you imagine how Judge John Judge would be in the Delphi case? How much more fair, how much more justice we'd have if Frances took a leaf out of Judge John Judge's book. Oh dear. Anyway, let's get back to the matter at hand. So this is the order. It's only 2 pages. The court, having had this matter under advisement following a hearing conducted on July 31st, 2024, on the defendant's motion to suppress statements that was originally filed on April the 11th. So this is how long the defense has been waiting for her judgment, since April. Yeah. The state's objection to the defendant's motion to suppress the confessions was filed on April 23rd. Look, Nick does get his responses in quickly. Can't fault him for that. Gets his responses in quickly. And then they all wait. The entire court waits for the judge to take months to get round to things. Also, the state's motion to dismiss the motion to suppress filed May 17th. And the state's motion for admissibility filed May 6th. And having considered the witness's testimony, the exhibits admitted into evidence, the arguments of counsel, and the applicable statutes and case law, now grants the state's request for pretrial ruling on admissibility pursuant to Idaho Code 23-33-1-17. Okay. The statements given by defendant to Dr. Monica H. Waller, who is a clinical psychologist, are not privileged based upon the exceptions noted in statute. And I did look this up. Actually, we'll look it up again. Hold on. Can I copy this? I did look. Won't let me copy it now. Hold on. Idaho Code. What was the number again? Hold on. 25-33-117. 25-33-117. Okay. Here we go. All right. So this is Idaho Code 25-33-1-17, and it's about the exceptions to privileged communications. So what they mean by privileged communications is discussions or conversations between the defendant and, let's say, for example, their team, their lawyers. That's privileged, right? Nobody can ask the defendant's lawyer onto the stand to say, what did you talk about in private? And there's various other exceptions. And one of them is that with those discussions had with your therapist or your psychologist or, your medical team. That's also privilege, but there are exceptions to that kind of privilege. So this is what Francis has relied on here. A psychologist licensed under this article may not disclose any information acquired from persons with whom the psychologist has dealt with in a professional capacity, except under the following circumstances. 1. Trials for homicide when the disclosure relates directly to the fact or immediate circumstances of said homicide. So that's what Francis has relied on. Idaho Code 25-33-117.1. Christina, member for 23 months. Happy Friday to you as well. One more month and you will be an OG. One more month. Yeah, Indiana Code. Sorry. Do I keep saying Idaho? I always get Idaho and Indiana mixed up at the best of times. But given that I spent, 7 hours listening to Coburger's hearing in Idaho, I've got Idaho on the brain. So from moving forward in this live stream, if I say Idaho, I mean Indiana. So I do apologize. This is Indiana Code. Indiana Code 25-33-117.1. Trials for homicide when the disclosure relates directly to the fact or immediate circumstances of said homicide. Okay. All right. So all the confessions that he made during his sessions with Dr. Waller, according to Francis, are fair game. Cool. All right. So that's what she's relied on. That's what she's relied on. That exception to the privileged communications that a defendant normally would have with their psychologist. So the statute, as we've read, trials for homicide when the disclosure relates directly to the fact or immediate circumstances of said homicide. However, how do we know, Francis? Thank you, Susan B, for the $1.99. Thank you so much. Treat time. Treat time for the doggos. Yeah, absolutely. It's always treat time for them. It's always treat time. Look. How do we know that what Richard Allen said during his communications with Dr. Waller, the clinical psychologist, are directly related to the immediate circumstances of the homicide? Because if he's quote unquote confessing, but he's saying a load of garbage, a load of nonsense, stuff that is factually incorrect. Like he's confessing to things that didn't happen, that you know, the cops know, we all know didn't happen. You know, one of his confessions was that he essayed the girls. No signs of essay. One of his confessions was that he shot them in the back. They weren't shot. They didn't die by firearms. So how do we know? And how does Francis know? Presumably Francis has actually seen, surely, you know, seen in writing what the confessions actually were. Therefore, she could make an assessment on whether or not they're consistent with the actual facts of the murders. Or maybe she hasn't, because Dr. Waller got rid of all her notes. Dr. Waller doesn't save her notes. She just makes, you know, little brief summaries. So we've only got Dr. Waller's word for what Richard Allen actually said to her. Now, I'm not saying she's going to lie under oath. I'm not saying that at all. But what if, this is my question to Francis, what if the confessions he made to Dr. Waller are not consistent with the details of the murders? If so, then all it's doing in putting those in front of the jury is confusing matters. Or look at it this way, maybe it's best that the confessions are included in the trial, because he's confessed to a great number of people in addition to Dr. Waller. That's just one person that Francis had to deal with because she's a psychologist and she was, you know, treating him in a professional capacity. So obviously Francis had to address that directly. But here's the thing. I'm in two minds over this. I'm in two minds over it. Let me know what you think. That perhaps the jury should hear the confessions, because as each person takes the stand to whom he confessed, the jury is going to be inundated by a plethora of different confessions, a plethora of, well, I shot them in the back, well, I essayed them, none of which are consistent with the crime scene. So I think that would be very clear to the jury that Richard Allen wasn't in his right mind, that Richard Allen is just talking garbage, gobbledygook. She doesn't care what the evidence is. She absolutely doesn't. Which I think is why I'm like, when I read this, I thought, yeah, predictable, absolutely predictable. Let's pick on a psychotic man. Let's take his absolute lowest point. He's probably the lowest he's ever been in his entire life. Let's rub it in and let the jury hear all of his psychotic meanderings through confession after confession. Let's all hear it. And I thought, that is cruel. That is cruel. That was my first thought. It's cruel to allow that, and it will just seek to confuse the jury. And then I thought on it, and I thought maybe they should hear it, because maybe that will hammer home just how poor his mindset was. So that's where I'm at. All right. So all statements given by defendant to Dr. Waller are admissible in the trial. Defendant's argument to the contrary go to the weight the jury would give such statements, not their admissibility. So I actually agree with that. Sorry. I kind of agree with it. Look, under normal circumstances, with a judge that was fair and a process to which the judge wanted to actually uphold the law and, you know, do the best for both sides, you know, hold those scales of justice even, as a judge is meant to do. Under those kind of circumstances, I would say, no, let's hear it, because I would trust that the judge wasn't going to allow the opposing party, i.e. the prosecution, too much leeway to use those confessions in a way that isn't fair and that isn't just. So that's why I've got reservations. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at, CW. Worried that Slicknick is going to cherry pick the ones that sound the most prejudicial, and the defense don't have a lot of time to get loads of evidence in due to the trial only lasting 3 weeks. Yes, that's what I'm getting at. That because Francis is giving them a very short time window, you know, she's saying that the trial can't go any more than what she puts in her calendar, which is bizarre, but that's what she's saying. And because she's shown time and time and time again to be biased, it does make me worry that she's going to favour the prosecution, allow Nick so much leeway with the way that he talks about these confessions, that it's going to unfairly prejudice the jury. And then she's just going to stop every single, you know, every time the defense says something, Nick's going to object. She's going to say, you know, sustained. And the jury isn't going to actually hear what they should hear, which concerns me. Which concerns me. I would like to have a list of the 61 confessions, the 61 different times that he confessed, and what he said to every one of those during every one of those confessions, so we can see. And obviously we're not going to get this before trial, so I'm happy to wait till the trial to get this, but I would like it to be that at the trial there is the full list of exactly what he said in each of those 61 confessions, so that we can all judge for ourselves how closely related what he said was to the actual facts of the crime scene, of the murders, the autopsies, etc. Because if you have 61 confessions and 59 of them are inconsistent with what happened, so he's just talking crap, and then you've got 2 of them that appear to be, oh, this is stuff only the killer would know, therefore he must be the killer, then the preponderance of the evidence suggests that, you know, on 2 occasions he got it right just by chance, because 59 other times he said things that weren't consistent with the crime scene and with the murders. So I'd like to see that. Are we going to see that? I don't think we are, because, you know, most of these confessions, they're not recorded anywhere. They're not on camera. They're not on you know, on audio. So we've only got the words from the people who actually heard them. Now, the confessions that he gave to his family, they were over the phone. Therefore, they are recorded. Therefore, we'll hear those. We'll hear those. But things that he said to Dr. Waller, that's just going to be her interpretation. That's going to be her paraphrasing what he said, which loses the nuance, which loses the... Unless she records all the sessions. I mean, it could be she records all the sessions. If she records all the sessions, then, yeah, let's hear it. Not that we personally are going to hear it, because, you know, she's not allowing cameras. But we'll find out what they were. We'll find out what they were. But what about the suicide companions to whom he confessed? What about the guards to whom he confessed? Well, they've not recorded it, because although his cell has video, there's no audio to that video. Or so we've been told. So we've been told there's no audio to that video. So we've only got their word. And quite frankly, even though I would be fairly confident that Dr. Waller, as a professional, isn't going to lie under oath, I don't have the same confidence in the suicide companions. And I certainly don't have the confidence in the guards to not lie under oath. So there's that. Okay, moving on. Having taken the state's motion to dismiss, the motion to suppress filed April 11th, under advisement at the hearing, the court agrees with the state that the defendant has failed to comply with the criminal rules of procedure. Get this. By neglecting to clearly state which specific statements he is seeking to suppress, nor the legal basis for the suppression. Well, how on earth are the defense team going to be able to state in writing exactly what those statements were if they've not been told exactly what those statements were? Because, yes, they'll have heard the confessions to his family, but they don't have Dr. Waller's notes from her sessions with Richard, because she gets rid of her notes. And the notes taken by any suicide companions or the guards, well, I don't take, like I said just before, I don't take what they've got to say as factual. So how can the defense put in a motion, put into writing the actual statements word for word, what they want suppressing, if they don't know what those statements were word for word? So they're stuck between the rock and a hard place now. Didn't the correctional staff film them or something? No. The statements, the confessional statements that Rick made to the suicide companions who sat outside his cell, taking notes on all their observations, and then when they got fired, the guards did it. They're not recorded. The audio isn't recorded because the video in Rick's cell is video only. There's no audio to it. So no. All right. So the defense here is stuck between a rock and a hard place, because how do they have each specific statement when they haven't been told word for word what those statements are? Okay. Despite these deficiencies, the court has been able to determine that the statements given to the defendant's family members were voluntary, not coerced by any state action, and were not made under threat of violence or improper influence. Although the defendant is clearly in custody, he initiated the communication with his family and was not subject to custodial interrogation when he spoke to his family. So because he wasn't being interrogated when he made those statements, she says he made those statements voluntarily, which I guess he did. However, what she's omitting to talk about here is the conditions that he was under. You know, we're not seeing the bigger picture. We're not seeing the mindset that he was experiencing at that time. The conditions that were so harsh, conditions that should not have lasted longer than 30 days, i.e. being in solitary confinement, and the only communications he had with anyone was the suicide companions who weren't meant to talk to him and the guards. Those were his only human communications other than Dr. Waller. So those harsh conditions, being under solitary confinement, being harangued, being told to kill himself, being told by everybody that he's a baby killer, the fact that he's always suffered from depression, so his normal state is depressed. So after months of this treatment, he descends into psychosis. So the stuff that he said to his family, how do we know that he wasn't told before he made those calls, you know, just tell your family that you did it and all of this will stop? How do we know what was put in his head before he made those statements to his family? We don't know. Moonbeam Muse, member for 28 months. Didn't know members could send milestone chats. You absolutely can. I think you get one free message per month or something. I don't actually know how it works, honestly. But thank you for being a member for 28 months. You're definitely one of the OG. Yeah, the Ordinance Guards, no less. How do we know that they weren't constantly haranguing him saying, all you need to do is confess and all of this will stop? To somebody who's in the throes of psychosis, they would believe something like that. She's not looking at the bigger picture. All right. Okay. Further, the statements given by defendant to the corrections officers, ordinists, the inmate companions, who we've only got the prison's word that these guys were, you know, being suicide companions for the right reasons. They're doing it to get time off their sentence. They're doing it to show that they have good behavior now. And because there's no audio to that video that's being, you know, filming Rick 24/7, how do we know what they're saying to him? They're not meant to speak to him. They're just meant to be observing him. But how do we know what they were actually saying to him? you know, the fact that they were there constantly outside of his cell, feeding into his spiraling downwards of his mental state, we have no idea what that man's experienced. Yeah, Ordinist guards. Yeah, two of the guards that were in control of Richard Allen during that time have admitted, given sworn statements to the court, that they were Norse pagan heathens, I think the terms they used, and they had In Ordinary Trust patches on their prison uniforms. When the warden told them to take their patches off their uniforms, one of them tattooed an Ordinary symbol onto his face. Dear God. Dear God. Okay. All right, let's start this again. Further, the statements given by defendant to corrections officers, inmate companions, the warden, mental health personnel, medical personnel, and the Indiana State Police were unsolicited by any of those individuals and were voluntarily given without coercion or interrogation. How do we know that they were unsolicited? How do we know? Has Judge Francis Gull spoken to every single corrections officer, inmate companion, the warden, the mental health personnel, like apart from Dr. Waller, medical personnel, and the Indiana State Police? Has she spoken to every one of those entities under oath, you know, under penalty of perjury, to actually hear from them that those confessions were completely unsolicited and were completely voluntary? No. And Indiana State Police, when did Richard Allen confess to the Indiana State Police? When was that? When was that? Because that came as a big shock to me. That in this order that addresses the motion about suppressing confessional statements, well, when did Richard Allen? I'll wait for you to, you know, do all the research you need. I'll wait. When did Richard Allen confess to the Indiana State Police? Because we've heard about him supposedly confessing to the guards and the, you know, people inside the prison, the inmate companions, the warden, medical personnel. We've heard about all of that. That was all discussed at the 3-day hearings. But when did Richard Allen confess to the Indiana State Police? I'll wait. Because there is nowhere have we been told that Richard Allen was visited by anyone from the Indiana State Police during his incarceration. The only time we've been advised that Richard Allen spoke to any member of the Indiana State Police was on October 26th, the day that he was arrested. And that was Jerry Holman, then Sergeant Jerry Holman. And we know exactly what he said to Jerry Holman. And he denied any involvement in the murders throughout that entire interview. And then he was arrested, taken into custody. A few days later, shipped off to Westville before he'd even got lawyers to defend him. So I'll say again, when did Richard Allen make any confessional statements to the Indiana State Police? So Judge Francis Gull either is mistaken or she knows something we don't. So I hope the defense responds to this and asks that very question. When was Richard Allen visited by the Indiana State Police? Any member of them? Because that's, it's a big organization, just saying Indiana State Police. Well, let's be a little bit more specific, Francis. When did Richard Allen confess to any member of the Indiana State Police? I want to know the name of the person he confessed to. I want to know the date of that confession. And I want to know the location in which that confession took place. Because the only time that we are aware of, as interested members of the public, that Richard Allen spoke to any member of the Indiana State Police was October 26, 2022, the day he was arrested. And he did not, absolutely 100%, did not make any confessional statements. He denied any involvement in the murders. He denied. A word that Francis is very familiar with. He denied any involvement. So when was Richard Allen visited by any member of the Indiana State Police? And were his lawyers present? Are the ISP confessions when he was first interviewed or when he told DD? Who's DD? He was at the bridge. Oh, Dan Dullard. They're not confessions, though, are they? Like, yeah, he told Dan Dullard and Jerry Holman that he was at the bridge on that day. But Dan Dullard, who said he recorded his, all his interviews with witnesses, but then can't find Richard Allen's. He said he was on the bridge, but loads of other people were on those trails as well that same day, because it being unseasonably warm for a February, and because the school was out, there was a bunch of people out on the trails that afternoon. So admitting being there on the trails is not confessing to a double murder, is it? And to Jerry Holman, he said he was there between 12 and 1:30. And then he left. So that's what he said to Jerry Holman. So he didn't even put himself during that interview on October 26, 2022. He didn't even put himself on the trails, on the bridge at the time of the murders. So, no, that's not confessions. So either Francis is confused, and she might well be, we're all human, we all make mistakes. She might genuinely be confused that, she's just added the Indiana State Police in there, thinking that he did confess to them and whatever. And she's genuinely mistaken, or she knows something we don't. So that's very, very, very concerning, in my opinion. All right, moving on. The defendant has not shown that he suffered from psychological coercion by the state, which caused him to make these statements. All right, Francis. I would like Francis to do an experiment here. I would like Francis to agree to be incarcerated in Westville Correctional Facility, to be in solitary confinement, to be harangued, to be told that she's a baby killer, to be told that she she's a low life and she needs to kill herself. All right. I want her to do that for let's say a year. Let's say a year. Let's do that. Let's do an experiment on Francis. She can take a year out. She can be paid handsomely at the end of it, so she's got an incentive to stay there. And let's see how well her mental state bears out. Let's see. Because somebody under the conditions that Richard Allen was under Indiana law should not have been in solitary confinement for longer than 30 days. And he did, a year in Westville? So from November, when was he transferred to Wabash? Yeah, it was about November. So he was there a year. No, December. So he's there over a year. He was shipped off to Wabash in December, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, Wabash was only slightly better. At least at Wabash, he wasn't being guarded by ordinance, but still in solitary confinement. So the only times he ever saw the light of day was for 1 hour a week when he was allowed to exercise, and when he was, you know, sent to Carroll County or Allen County for hearings. The only times he ever saw the light of day. Otherwise, he was under solitary confinement in a tiny cell being abused. So if you don't consider that psychological coercion, well, I don't know what it is. I don't know what you would call it. I don't know what you would call it. Thank you, Denise, for the £10. That's very, very kind of you. It's very kind of you. And if you're told, if you there's no light at the end of the tunnel, you know, and then you're told that you're a baby killer every day, and then you're given your discovery, and you read all the things that people have found out about you, allegedly, in your very weak state of mind, aren't you going to come to believe that, well, I must have done it? I can't be going through such torture if I didn't do it. So maybe when he was in the throes of psychosis, maybe he actually believed he did it. Maybe he actually believed it. He was so devoid of reality that he actually started to believe himself, truly believe himself, that he must have done it. So if Francis doesn't want to call that psychological coercion, even though he's not being interrogated, what they're doing here is playing the long game. What the prosecution set up with Westville, and I truly believe that Nick McClelland set this up, and that's why Nick wanted him kept at Westville, because Nick doesn't have the same, communication with Wabash. He went to Westville for a reason, and there was a reason why the prosecution needed him to stay at Westville, because they knew that if they played the long game, they could get him to confess. So they don't have to interrogate him. They don't have to do things that, by anybody's standards, would be coercion. All they do is play the long game. And it worked. It worked. Eleanor, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships. So we've got Amy V, Earth, Space Cat Corridor. What a great name. Gaelic Magic, and Vintage Mama of 3. Welcome, you guys. Get monthly membership courtesy of Helena M. Thank you so much. To the contrary, the evidence shows he specifically sought out the warden by written communication he initiated and verbal statements he offered to guards, inmate companions, mental health professionals, and medical personnel. So he actually sought out. Well, do you think that if you were in solitary confinement with no end in sight, being abused, being told you're a baby killer, reading in the discovery that you did this, all this evidence that they supposedly have against you, would you, in your weakened, devoid of reality state of mind, start to truly believe that you must have done this? Wouldn't you then start seeking out people to talk to say, look, I did this. Make this go away. I did this. Okay. All right. Denise, thank you so much. Gifting 5 memberships. So we've got Explore Core, Cromley Lux Recorporation, The Wheels on the Bus, Jessa Twin, and Anonymous. Thank you so much, Denise. So another 5 members. Welcome you all. Welcome to the Secret Agents Club. Check out the members area. All right. The defendant has failed to show any of these statements were the result of coercive interrogation by the state, or that they were the result of his pre-trial detention. Oh, I see. So illegally being kept in solitary confinement month after month after month does nothing to your mental state. Okay, all right. Does nothing to your mental state. So no, they've not used coercive interrogation because they knew that they wouldn't get away with that. But playing the long game, keeping him in solitary in horrendous conditions, she can't see that that would have an effect on his psyche. Okay, all right. And the next bit just tops it off. The totality of the circumstances of defendant's pre-trial detention were not intended to force confessions from the defendant. Was she there? How does she know what that game was? Okay. The defendant's pre-trial detention is to protect him from harm. Unfreaking believable. Unfreaking believable. So somebody who loses like a third of their body weight in 2 months, somebody who starts eating their own shit, that's meant to be protection from harm. All right then. Okay. All right. This is my favorite sentence. This is my favorite sentence. While the defendant does suffer from major depressive disorder and anxiety, those are not serious mental illnesses that prevent the defendant from making voluntary statements. What about psychosis, Francis? Francis seems to be such an expert on clinical psychology that she can be absolutely sure that major depressive disorder doesn't lead people into making involuntary statements. All right, major depressive disorder, mood disorder, anxiety, mood disorders. Okay, all right. So normally, people who are depressed or suffering from generalized anxiety don't confess to murders that they didn't do normally. All right. But also people with major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder don't normally eat their own shit. Do they? No. You have to be way beyond suffering from major depression or generalized anxiety to start eating your own shit or watering down the papers that comprise your discovery and eating them. Those are not the kind of behaviors that people with major depression or generalized anxiety engage in. However, people who are psychotic, people who have gone way beyond the definition of major depression, which is a serious mental condition in its own right, but it doesn't take you out of reality. It might make you delusional in some ways, but it doesn't take you completely out of reality. You have to go beyond what would be defined as major depression or generalized anxiety disorder to start displaying the kind of behaviors that Richard Allen was engaging in. So the psych expert that is Frances Gull has been very selective here in the way that she's characterized Richard Allen's behavior, because she has completely ignored the facts that Richard Allen was beyond depression, was beyond anxiety. He was suffering from psychosis, which is, by definition, a devolution from the real world. And in that state, you are very likely to make statements that are not true because you're not in reality anymore. And we know that that is what Dr. Waller believed that Richard Allen was, that he was psychotic. Let's turn now, because we're not allowed in, in hearings, the general population, unless you can actually go to Indiana and go to the courtroom, because these proceedings are held out of the eyes of the public. They're not televised. We don't get audio. We've only got the notes that people kindly took from the day, from actually being there. Okay. And these are Yellow Jacket's notes. And I think this was day one of the 3-day hearing. And this is notes that Yellow Jacket took from Dr. Waller's testimony. So, and Waller actually, even though her actual notes that she takes during sessions were destroyed, like she doesn't keep them, she does make like overall comments in the system. She does summarize the sessions in the system. All right. So this is all from Waller's notes. March 2023, for the first time. So Rick had been in solitary confinement in Westville for probably 4 months at this point, because it was like mid-November, or was it even early November, when he was shipped off to Westville. All right. So he's been incarcerated in Westville in solitary confinement now for 4 months. And he states, I don't feel right. Waller acknowledged his baseline is depression. That's his normal. Like Rick Allen is depressed. That's his normal state. However, in this normal state, in his regular life, before all of this absolute torture and trauma hit him, in his normal life, he was married for many years. He raised a family. He was employed full-time. I think he was a manager or an assistant manager at CVS. So, even though his normal operating process was one of depression, he was very functional. Okay, cool. All right. So Waller acknowledged his baseline is depression and characterized this condition as poor, critical, and deteriorating. That's the major thing here. So baseline is depression, but in March 2023, he starts to deteriorate. And surprise, surprise, this coincides with when he started confessing. Right. 1st of April, it was documented that he started to experience suicidal ideation, which he hadn't reported previously, and delusions. So, beginning of April, he's starting to deteriorate into something that is going to very quickly spiral out of the definition of depression. Waller's notes continued. Rick said death would bring relief, and Waller observed insomnia, poor appetite. This is the point where he starts losing a colossal amount of weight, hopelessness, low self-esteem, and more that was unspecified. So these things actually are symptoms of depression, like sleep disorders, changes in appetite, feelings of hopelessness, suicide ideation, even low self-esteem, all symptoms of depression. So on the 1st of April, Rick, in my opinion, would be still classed as depressed. Okay. However, one day later, April the 2nd, Rick was now more critical, so very quickly deteriorating. At some point, emergency involuntary medication administered, reason, head injury, and self-harm. So at some point in early April was the time when he was throwing himself against the walls of his cell, literally throwing himself at the walls of his cell, gave himself a head injury in an attempt to harm himself, in an attempt to maybe end his life in a cell the size of a shed, that he's got nowhere to end his life other than create, colossal head injuries. By April 13th, so in just under 2 weeks, we've now got grave disability. So at this point, he is beyond major depression. He's observed consuming feces. So anybody who has suffered from depression, and many people have, have you ever consumed your own shit when you were depressed? Because last time I looked, the definition of depression, the symptoms related to depression, do not involve throwing yourself against walls to give yourself major head injuries. And particularly, the symptoms of depression don't involve eating your own shit. All right. So they're considering involuntary medication. So there's an emergency involuntary medication hearing held, and it was decided that they were going to give him involuntary medication. All right. On April 21st, Waller had a conversation with Rick regarding his competency to stand trial. So she's now believing that he's so ill that he's no longer competent to stand trial, and she had that discussion with him. She believes he called her and expressed concern about his deteriorating mental state. So he knew how bad things were becoming. Yet, so we're still in April, he had disjointed thoughts and confessions. So this is when he started to confess, when he's in this utter state of the worst thing you could possibly imagine he's experiencing. His mind is no longer his own. On May the 3rd, he said, "I want to confess." So after a month of this deteriorating mental state, this at some point just becomes way beyond the normal symptoms of depression. He then starts to confess. Waller questioned if he was being truthful, as he made similar statements multiple times. So she knows what a state he's in. She called it grave disability. She admitted during this hearing that if it wasn't for his safekeeping order, which Judge Francis Gull says was to keep him from harm, yet all of these things happened under the safekeeping order. But Dr. Waller said if it wasn't for the safekeeping order, he would have been sent to a psychiatric hospital. he would have been treated in hospital. But because of his safekeeping order, they couldn't send him to hospital. So the safekeeping order that was supposedly, in Judge Francis Gould's own words, was to protect him from harm, actually prevented him from getting treatment. Make that make sense? Worsening condition throughout May. By May 12th, Rick's disorganized thinking had accelerated. On May 18th, he had a man-down incident due to his next scheduled injection. So I don't know what that means. He was in a vegetative state. She characterized it as a vegetative state. So when does major depression involve being in a vegetative state? Janice was present, possibly crying. So I think Janice is his mother, and was shown documentation of Rick's vegetative state of depression. Okay. But this kind of second half of May was the peak. That was his peak. After which time he started showing some signs of improvement. Well, he was getting involuntary medication, so that probably did help. May 22nd, depression at peak. So we have trembling, stuttering, buckling knees, bulging eyes. When do people suffering from major depression or generalized anxiety have bulging eyes? When do their knees buckle under them? When are they in such a state that they are vegetative? Or do you think it's gone beyond the norms of major depression at that point? All right. But by July, so another 2 months down the line, he's got some signs of improvement. So his peak was the second half of May. So throughout April, he was deteriorating from his norm, which is just standard depression, deteriorated throughout April. That's when the confession started. May was his worst. That's when he confessed to Dr. Waller. June, we don't know about. Presumably, he was still vegetative, still eating his shit. I don't know what he was doing throughout June. But by mid-July, that's when he started to improve. And guess what? When he started to improve in July, the confession stopped. When he regained, a grip on reality, when he came out of this absolute horror that he'd been in for months, the confession stopped. And he started to, once again, say he wasn't guilty, that he didn't do this. Yeah, Gould definitely needs to F off. She's not accountable to anyone. Well, technically, she's accountable to the Supreme Court of Indiana, but they don't seem to think that there's a problem. Jadzia, welcome to Secret Agents. Thank you for joining. Welcome. All right. So, ongoing sessions, continued harassment and psychotic symptoms. So in November, so we're now moving on. So this was shortly before he was transferred. Rick was reporting still being haunted and harassed. The harassment occurred over the phone and spanned a significant time period. So I'd like to know more about that. Who was harassing him over the phone? And these are just additional notes. So March to June, the psychotic process was developing, as we said. Its peak was at mid-May. She actually diagnosed him. Dr. Waller actually diagnosed him with psychosis, rightly. And she noted a catatonic state, which would be like a vegetative state, disorganized speech, considered a serious mental illness. Question. As a doctor, do you agree that he met the criteria for severe mental illness? Answer, no doubt. Yet the court declared Department of Corrections to be a safe environment for Rick, despite his severe mental illness. Severe mental illness patients are typically placed in solitary confinement for 30 days per Indiana Department of Corrections codes. Waller acknowledged this policy. She noted the policy exists due to potential effects on the brain and because it's documented protocol. Exceptions to this 30-day policy are made for individuals deemed an extreme danger to others. Waller asserts that Rick did not fall under this extreme danger exemption. Question, approximately how long was Rick in solitary? Answer, 12 months. And this is before, this was just at Westville, and then he was transferred to Wabash, and he continued to spend his life in solitary confinement there. So for the entire time of his incarceration in state prisons, he was under solitary confinement, when he should actually have been, during the throes of his psychosis that he was diagnosed with by a professional, he should have been in a psychiatric hospital, not in solitary confinement in a state prison. Yet, Francis Gull, who is more of an expert than anybody, said, while the defendant does suffer from major depressive disorder and anxiety, those are not serious mental illnesses that prevent the defendant from making voluntary statements. So where was she during the time on the 31st of July when she was there on the bench? Where was she mentally? And she kind of just checked out? Was she, planning her next vacation and she just was, in a world of her own and she just wasn't with it? Did she miss Dr. Waller saying that Rick was in a state of severe mental illness and diagnosed as psychotic? She obviously missed that, didn't she? Yeah, she missed that. She missed that bit. The court finds the statements given by the defendant to Dr. Waller, the warden, inmates, guards, medical personnel, medical professionals, and law enforcement personnel was not coerced, was voluntary, were not the result of interrogation by the state or its actors, nor the product of his confinement, and therefore denies the defendant's motion to suppress statements. Okay. Again, she mentions law enforcement personnel. So finds the statements given by a defendant and law enforcement personnel. So when did he speak to the Indiana State Police? And when did he confess to the Indiana State Police? And how she's completely missed the point here. It's absolutely stunning. Stunning. It does. It needs to go to a human rights court. Yeah. I mean, look, this is just going to be this is a appellant. It's got appellant court written all over it. If Richard Allen is convicted, and I believe he will be, I do believe he will be. I'm sorry to say, I think all the cards are stacked against him. However good Andy and Brad are, the cards are absolutely stacked against them. I would be shocked if he's acquitted. I honestly would be shocked if he's acquitted. So if and when he is convicted, this has got appellate court written all over it. This case is going to set precedents for years to come in the appellate courts. But yet, Rick's got to endure this for years to come. It's absolutely destroyed his life and that of his family. And of course, beyond everything else, as this drags through the appellate courts, which can take years, Abby and Libby's families have got to endure the continued intrusion into their lives, the continued stress that go into court hearings and, you know, what's going to come next, and just having this big question mark as to how this is going to what's going to happen next. The media intrusion into their lives is going to go on for years and years and years because of this judge. Because of this judge. That's the bottom line. Because of this judge. So that's where we're at. That's where we are. That's where we are. It's just horrendous. And this could happen to anyone. This could happen to anyone. If this is allowed to, you know, this has been allowed to continue, but this could be you, this could be me, this could be someone in your family, someone that you know, one of your loved ones. This could be them, because there's been so many ways that justice has been just thwarted, denied, that it's scary. It's really scary. It's really scary. So we're going to wait to see what comes next. As I said at the beginning, there's one more order that she needs to issue. It might come today, might come sometime next week. I have been expecting these two orders to come this week. That's what I've been expecting, because she's up to her 30 days. Because she's meant to issue an order within 30 days. And we're now August the 30th. So I am expecting this order to come today, or else she's running late. Now, running late is her normal operating procedure. However, she knows that the defense is on her, because they applied to the Supreme Court of Indiana to have her removed because she basically wasn't doing her job. Do you remember this? We talked about this in the live stream recently. The admin person from the Supreme Court said that no, the defense can't be allowed. Can't be allowed for the defense to say that the judge needs to be recused because she doesn't do her job. She doesn't issue orders within 30 days of a motion. Because they continued to post motions. So because they continued to do their jobs, which rightly they should have done, because they were keeping the case on track by, you know, posting motions before waiting for Francis to, you know, rule on the first one, then that negated the 30-day rule. So it's 30 days since the hearing, the 3-day hearing. That's why I'm expecting the order to come today. Might be wrong, but if I am, she's going to be jumped on by the defense. I think the defense will have got her as a lazy judge and are going to go straight back to the Supreme Court if she doesn't rule on it today. So if it comes, and it comes within, you know, a time frame where I'm actually awake and corpus mentis, then I will be back later. But if it comes really late, so in Indiana, they're 5 hours behind me. So if she posts her order at 6 p.m. her time, it's going to be 11 p.m. my time. And I'm probably going to consider that too late. Maybe I'll come back, but if it's earlier, then I will be back. Otherwise, it will be tomorrow that I discuss it. So you may well see me later. You may not. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you to those that donated. Welcome to all the new members. We've had quite a few new members today, so check out the members area. Thanks as always to the mods, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.